What's going on, new money? Just want to bring you guys a video picking up where we left off on the 2019 official white paper for Picoin from the Picore team. This is part 3. I'm going to be going over the governance and their roadmap at the time. If you guys didn't see the first 2 parts, check in the comments in the description down below. And if you guys want to see me going over the more recent white paper, then make sure you guys subscribe, like this video, letting me know that you appreciate this content. And I'm going to go ahead and get straight into it. Let me switch my screen over. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. Like I said in the past, although some of this information has changed, I still think it's good for us to get some context where the Picore team was coming from when doing some of the things that they did for Picoin. And then we can see also how things have evolved to be where they are now so we can make more informed decisions moving forward. So let's go ahead and get into the article. They start off by talking about governance itself in early cryptos, and then they go on to more specific Picoin governance models. And the article begins with governance, cryptocurrency for and by the people, challenges with first-generation governance models. They say trust is the foundation of any successful monetary system. One of the most important factors engendering trust is governance, or the process by which changes are implemented to the protocol over time. Despite its importance, governance is one of the most overlooked aspects of crypto economic systems. First-generation networks such as Bitcoin largely avoided formal or on-chain governance mechanisms in favor of informal or off-chain mechanisms arising from a combination of role and incentive design. By most measures, Bitcoin's governance mechanism has been quite successful, allowing the protocol to grow dramatically in scale and value since its inception. However, there has also been some challenges. The economic concentration of Bitcoin has led to a concentration of political power. The result is that everyday people can get caught in the middle of destructive battles between massive holders of Bitcoin. One of the most recent examples of this challenge has been the ongoing battle between Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. These civil wars can end in a fork where the blockchain. I don't think that was typed out properly. For token holders, hard forks are inflationary and can threaten the value of their holdings. So essentially what they're saying here is they're outlining just some brief history as to what the governance models were like before, what's already in existence, and then they're going to go into how their governance model, I'm supposing, is a little bit different. They say that Bitcoin was mostly off-chain, so there's people messaging each other, either emailing or on different things that they used to have back in the early days of the internet that people used to go to in forums and chats that people would actually create different things on, and that Bitcoin was actually made on. So they're saying a lot of that was off-chain, and there's also some on-chain or more formal ways of governing a system. So 2 other things I wanted to highlight have to do with them talking about the concentration of Bitcoin. It's kind of a fair point. Satoshi Nakamoto themselves, it's an unknown wallet address, hasn't touched the Bitcoins in a long time. However, it is still a pretty concentrated amount that they do have, as well as a couple other people have a measurable percent of Bitcoin itself. So it's just one of the challenges they mention, as well as the Bitcoin Cash thing is kind of funny. Obviously, this is a bit outdated. It's 2025 when I'm reading this, and this was written in 2019. But I'd say that the BTC versus BCH debate, the Bitcoin versus Bitcoin Cash debate's pretty kicked now. Bitcoin's absolutely destroying Bitcoin Cash, although it's still around. Still a top 50 crypto, I believe. Anyways, we'll go ahead and continue to learn how their Pi governance model is different. It's a 2-phase plan, they say. In an article challenging the merits of on-chain governance, Vlad Zamfir, one of Ethereum's core developers, argues that blockchain governance is not an abstract design problem. It's an applied social problem. One of Vlad's key points is that it is very difficult to design governance systems a priori or before observations of the particular challenges arising from a specific political system. One historical example is the founding of the United States, the first experiment with democracy in the United States. The Articles of Confederation failed after an 8-year experiment. The founding fathers of the United States were then able to draw upon the lessons of the Articles of Confederation to craft the Constitution, a much more successful experiment. Essentially, what they're saying here is that a lot of the challenges of blockchain and governance have been unknown because the technology is so new. So it's very challenging to create social structures around these new concepts. I did not mean to do that. And to give an example, they give the Articles of Confederation and talk about the United States and how it's changed over time. So that was a good one. Hits home for myself. So fair point for sure. Let's hear how they are changing the typical governance structure in crypto. They say to build an enduring governance model, Pi will pursue a two-phase plan. There's the provisional governance model, less than 5,000 members. I guess this is the first part of the plan. Until the network hits a critical mass of 5 million members, Pi will operate under a provisional governance model. This model will closely resemble off-chain governance models currently employed by protocols like Bitcoin and Ethereum, with Pi Core's team playing an important role in guiding the development of the protocol. However, Pi Core team will still rely heavily on the input of the community. The Pi mobile application itself is where Pi's core team has been soliciting community input and engaging with pioneers. Pi embraces the community critiques and suggestions, which is implemented by the open for comments features of Pi's landing page, FAQs, and white paper. Whenever people browse these materials on Pi's websites, they can submit comments on a specific section right there to ask for questions and make suggestions. Offline pioneer meetups that Pi Core's team have been organizing will also be an important channel for community input. Additionally, Pi Core's team will develop more formal governance mechanics. One potential governance system is liquid democracy. In a liquid democracy, every pioneer will have the ability to either vote on an issue directly or to delegate their vote to another member of the network. Liquid democracy would allow for both broad and efficient membership from Pi's community. Interesting. Okay, so what they're essentially saying here is that in the beginning, they were doing things very similar to Bitcoin and Ethereum. They're essentially saying it was really just a bunch of people meeting up, networking, and figuring out how do they want to build this. There was nothing on chain. There weren't a lot of votes or proposals so far as I can tell. However, they were getting feedback from the community via the different avenues that they have on the app. So really they're saying in the beginning with less than 5 million members or 5 million people that I guess were pioneers, they were just kind of meeting up and developing things behind closed doors. And now I suppose with more than 5 million members, they're going to move on to this part 2. At least that's the plan, and we'll hear more about it. Let's see. Pi's constitutional convention greater than 5 million members. Upon hitting 5 million members, a provisional committee will be formed based on previous contributions to the Pi network. This committee will be responsible for soliciting and proposing suggestions from and to the wider community. It will also organize a series of on and offline conversations where Pi members will be able to weigh on Pi's long-term constitution. Given Pi's global user base, the Pi network will conduct these conventions at multiple locations across the world to ensure accessibility. In addition to hosting in-person conventions, Pi will also use its mobile application as a platform for allowing Pi members to participate in the process remotely. Whether in person or online, Pi's community membership will have the ability to participate in the crafting of Pi's long-term governance structure. So what I'm essentially getting from this paragraph is that after the 5 million member mark, they're going to start transitioning into a more on-chain approach, but there are still some things from a business perspective that will have to be done off-chain. And for anybody who thinks that maybe the Pi Core team is doing too much or this is too centralized or something like this, I definitely understand where you're coming from. But I think if you're newer here, I would just take a look at some of the other history for some of the other things in crypto that have developed. It's very difficult. It's very challenging to have a protocol start and be just totally decentralized. It really doesn't happen. Even Bitcoin itself, Ethereum, any of these networks, they started out with different groups of people that came together, executed on decisions until the network grew to a certain point where then they could allow it to become more decentralized. But from a business and operational standpoint, sometimes you have to have things just be centralized in order to get things off the ground, execute on ideas. You can't be waiting for votes, especially in the beginning of building a business. It's not very practical to be waiting for so many different votes and things to be happening and getting all these different people involved when you just need to be executing on some sort of core mission and core vision. So I think what they're saying here is less than 5 million members. They were doing mostly everything off-chain. It was the team building different things like that. Now greater than 5 million members. I'm assuming members in this case is pioneers. But after 5 million members, then they started putting more governance aspects on-chain. And so now we're going to go ahead and get into their very short roadmap. And then I'm going to just continue this video series. I'm going to read over the 2021 white paper, and we'll see how some of these things have advanced and have changed over time. Okay, so the article continues, moving on to a very short roadmap. Like I said, it's only 3 phases and they're each a paragraph. So let's get into it. The phase 1 is about the design, distribution, and trust graph Bootstrap, could be a Web3 band. They go on to say that the Pi server is operating as a faucet, emulating the behavior of a decentralized system as it will function once it's live. Again, this is in phase 1. During this phase, improvements in the user experience and behavior are possible and relatively easy to make compared to the stable phase of the mainnet. All minting of coins to users will be migrated to the LiveNet once it launches. In other words, the LiveNet will pre-mint in its Genesis block all account holders' balances generated during phase 1 and continue operating just like the current system, but fully decentralized. Pi is not listed on exchanges during this phase, and it is impossible to buy Pi with any other currency. What they're essentially saying is they're going to test out the mining function and how the rewards are working and different things like that, the functionality of the faucet itself, and they're essentially giving miners at this time an IOU. And they're also saying that you cannot buy Pi on any other exchanges. So it's essentially just testing out how the network effects are actually working. So that was the early phase, phase 1. Now they go on to phase 2, the test net. Before we launch the mainnet, the node software will be deployed on a test net. The test net will use the same exact trust graph as the mainnet, but on a testing Pi coin. Pi core team will host several nodes on the testnet, but will encourage more pioneers to start their own nodes on the testnet. In fact, in order for any node to join the mainnet, they are advised to begin on the testnet. The testnet will be run in parallel with the Pi emulator in phase 1, and periodically, example daily, the results from both systems will be compared to catch the gaps and misses of the testnet, which will allow Pi developers to propose and implement fixes. After a thorough concurrent run of both systems, testnet will reach a state where its results consistently match the emulators. At the time when the community feels it's ready, Pi will migrate to the next phase. So what they're essentially saying here is with the testnet phase, they're also going to allow for the use of nodes in different people's computers. Right now they have them on Windows and Mac computers. You can actually run the nodes, and they're going to test out the different software. They're going to compare the two answers that the different softwares are getting. It's going to be very similar to the phase 1 where it's mostly IOUs. You can't buy or sell on any exchanges, anything like that. They just want to make sure that the actual technology is working properly, and then they're going to compare results from each of these nodes and the emulators, and if things are off, they're going to adjust, I guess, the function. They're going to adjust the math or whatever it is that devs do of each of these protocols. And then once they're done doing that and they get enough assurance that both protocols are aligning and things are working out well, then they move on to phase 3, which is their mainnet. And the Pi core team says when the community feels the software is ready for production and it has been thoroughly tested on the testnet, the official mainnet of the Pi network will be launched. An important detail is that in the transition into the mainnet, only accounts validated to belong to distinct real individuals will be honored. After this point, the faucet and the Pi network emulator of phase 1 will be shut down and the system will continue on its own forever. Wow. Future updates to the protocol will be contributed by the Pi developer community and Pi core's team and will be proposed by the committee. Their implementation and deployment will depend on nodes updating the mining software, just like any other blockchains. No central authority will be controlling the currency, and it will be fully decentralized. Balances of fake users or duplicate users will be discarded. This is a phase when Pi can be connected to exchanges and be exchanged for other currencies. All right, so mainnet and phase 3 is obviously where things get juicy, and there's just a couple of things I want to point out here. They say in the transition into mainnet, only accounts validated to belong to distinct real individuals will be honored. So here's obviously where KYC comes into play. They then go on to say after this point, the faucet and Pi network emulator of phase 1 will be shut down and the system will continue on its own forever. So they're saying then at this point, once I suppose once all of the validated accounts have been accounted for, then they're going to shut down the emulator, which is essentially giving people IOUs for mining, and they're actually going to run the system on the nodes that were described up here in testnet. And so the phase 1 will be shut down at that point. Then they're saying that future updates to the protocol, of course, will be proposed and contributed by the Pi developer community and Pi core team. and then it'll be proposed by the committee, and then the implementation, similar to other blockchains, relies on how many people update to the new software or to the new implementations. And they're saying no central authority will be controlling the currency, and it will be fully decentralized. Guys, let me know your guys' thoughts on this in the comments down below. They saying all the fake stuff will be discarded. Of course, it's taken them a long time to get to this point, and I am going to go into the updated white paper. Of course, a lot of this has changed, so here we are. Make sure you guys subscribe for this part 2, or me going over the more recent updates, if you will. Thank you guys so much for being here. Like I said, let me know your thoughts in the comments. As always, this has been Joe from New Money Crypto. We all know there's smart money, dumb money, old money, and years from now, they're going to be calling you new money. Until then, I'm going to catch you guys on a video soon. Much love. Peace.